we do a form of debate called public forum debate, which is two people against two people from the same school, one school against another. And the topics are all current events issues, and I can tell you that the topic this time for this meet, they change every month. The topic for this meet is going to be whether or not we should have a constitutional amendment to establish that only natural human beings have the rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Okay? So in other words, if you're familiar at all with this notion of corporate personhood, that has led to the super PACs and all this, so that's the topic they're going to be debating. Should corporations and unions and trusts, etc., have the rights of human beings, or should those rights only be there for people, only for natural human beings? Now, when you judge debate, these kids are going to walk in the room, and the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to flip a coin. You're going to flip a coin. And one team is going to decide whether or not they want to go either first or last, either be the first one to speak or the last team to speak, or they're going to decide if they want to go pro or con, or half and nay, as we say. If you live in Anchorage, you go pro or con. If you live in Southeast, you go half or nay. So they get to decide one or the other. So if I win the coin toss, I might think that my affirmative case is stronger than my negative case, so I might say, well, I'm going to go half. Then the other team gets to decide if they want to go first or last. Or maybe I think my cases are equally strong, and I'll just say, well, I'm going to go last. I want to speak second. Then the other team gets to choose if they want to go half or nay. And so the point here, and it's a very important point, what the kids are talking about is not necessarily what they believe, right? Because it was the coin toss that determined which way they were going to have to go. They have to be prepared to argue both ways. And we have constructed the resolution, which they will write on the board so that you can keep seeing it, while they're talking. We've constructed the resolution so both sides of the debate can be effectively argued. So, if you think that you need to leave your own baggage outside for any of these other events, when it comes to debate, you really need to park it outside. Because we're always talking about healthcare or nuclear power or something like that, and we all have opinions on these things, right? You cannot allow your opinion to sway what you think is the winning debate. It's based on what they are talking about to each other. Did they raise good points? Did they refute those points? Did they rebut their refutations, right? Imagine you're sitting in Mountain Market and you overhear some people talking at the table next to you and you're listening to them go back and forth on an issue. What you need to decide as the judge, as a lay judge, not as an expert, not as a court, not as a constitutional lawyer, just as a lay judge, you need to decide who you think made a stronger case. Usually it's based on maybe one key point, or maybe it was a preponderance of the evidence. I don't know. Okay, evidence. Some teams will be very, very heavy on evidence, and they're supposed to use some evidence. You're not supposed to be able to say, you aren't supposed to say anything you can't back up. But some kids will just go, it'll just be evidence, evidence, evidence. I'm quoting this person from this magazine or from this university or whatever, and they're just going through like that. And you can do that too much. This is supposed to be more about talking. This is supposed to be about making persuasive arguments. But you need some evidence, right? You can't have you can't go through the debate without presenting any evidence. But just because someone has more evidence doesn't necessarily mean they win the debate either. There will be, here's the format for it.
I'm writing it right now, so I'll post it.
Okay, here's the format. You have two people on either side, right? So one person from one team will get up and speak for 4 minutes. And they will have a prepared speech. It should be very polished because it's been written out, they've practiced reading it should be pretty smooth. They're going to lay out their case. They're going to give an intro, they're going to say that I've got a certain number of points to support my position, here they are, and then they're going to finish up in 4 minutes. The other team will go up and they'll present their case. Then those two guys, girls, whatever they are, they will crossfire. They will have 3 minutes, and again, you'll have a timer to take care of all the timing stuff. Don't worry about that. They will ask each other questions in a civil manner. The team that spoke first gets to ask the first question. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky.
You want us to show them?
If, not yet. Let me explain. If one person dominates the crossfire, that's good. You want to try to dominate the crossfire. But you don't want to dominate the crossfire to where you're obnoxious. If the other person is trying to speak, if they're trying to ask you a question, if they're trying to respond to your question, you need to let them. If you're just going to talk over them and talk over them and talk, that's not, you dock the person for that. This is not about being a belligerent lawyer. That's not what we're trying to train them to be. We're trying to train them to be persuasive and back up their arguments with facts. But there is a certain level of civility that we require and that you enforce. Not to say that if one person really doesn't have anything to say, or if they just stop talking and let the other person just take the floor for that 3-minute crossfire, hey, that's the way it goes. You've got to stand up for yourself to a point, right? Most of the schools, most of the kids are pretty good about it, and they'll be polite. There's a few kids that are getting, the blood gets up there, and man, they just don't want to let anybody else talk. And you should dock them for that, because that's not the way this is supposed to work. After you have that first speech crossfire, then the second person from each side speaks for 4 minutes. And usually that speech is confronting the other person's case. If there's no clash, if I don't hear Steve's points and say, Steve's second point is absolute bullshit, and I don't tell him, and I don't tell you why, then I'm not doing my job. I have to challenge his case and say why his case is not right. I have to clash with him. And so you have a constructive and a crossfire. 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Then you have the second constructives and another crossfire for 3 minutes. Okay?
One-on-one.
Well, these are the one-on-ones. Then you have what are called the summary speeches. The people who did the first constructives, and again, this is all going to be a machine. They're going to do each side's going to get 2 minutes to summarize. And they can talk about their own points. They might talk about a point their opponent raised. At this point in the debate, they should really be narrowing in on where they think they see an opening. This was a major part of my opponent's case here, and it's really flawed, and I'm going to really make sure you understand why it is flawed. So then you have these summary speeches, and then you have the grand crossfire, where all 4 of them can go at each other for 3 minutes. And again, it's supposed to be civil. The team that spoke first gets to ask the first question. But if Tim asks me a question and I answer the question, I can then say, and now I have a question for you. And he's supposed to shut up and let me answer it and let me ask him a question. If he just keeps running over me so I don't get to ask my question, that's not right. But I have to at least assert myself to say, hang on, I've got a question that I want to ask you now. And the kids should come in with questions that are prepared. And then finally, the second speakers, the people who did the second constructive, they give the last shots, which are each 2 minutes long. And that's when they stand out there and they go, here's what this debate really came down to today. This was the most important point of everything that we spoke about. And this is why I think that we won this debate, because blah, 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 blah. Okay? Go through there and go, well, that point was pretty well rebutted, or that point was not well rebutted, or that point was not touched at all. And you do what's called flowing the debate. As you go across your paper, you will construct this map, this flowing map of what you saw in the round, of which points were challenged and which points were not touched, and whether or not they were adequately rebutted or just negated or just became an equal. Well, I can't really decide on that one. And then you get to the end, and at the bottom of the ballot, it will say, what is the argument that you felt was the winning argument? What was the most important thing to you? Again, not based on your attitude coming in, not based on what you know to be reality, but based on what you saw in the room. Now, I know this probably sounds very overwhelming. It's really not. It's just like as if you were out in the market over here in conversation and you pick up a winner.
Tell them the story of the John Shively point, because that's clear.
Okay.
It's a nice, crisp.
So we just had the debate in Sitka that was about Pebble Mine. Should the Pebble Mine be developed because it's in the best economic interest of Alaska? Now, you might personally in your lives think that it should or it shouldn't. But believe it or not, there are actually arguments that can be made both sides. One, it's going to be bringing a lot of money in, it's going to create jobs. The other one, it's going to possibly impact fisheries resources. And so that's where they're debating, right? That's why there's two sides to the issue. Well, one of the schools, we found out partway through the tournament, it was obvious from the speeches that they were making, one of the schools had amassed all their information pro-Pebble from calling John Shively, who, if you listen to the news on this issue, you would know is the head of the Pebble Partnership. He's the director, the executive director of the Pebble Partnership, which is the public relations folks for pushing Pebble Mine. So they called John Shively, they interviewed John Shively. I mean, and they said this in their case. Well, we interviewed John Shively, head of the Pebble Partnership, and he said blah, 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 blah. Well, partway through the tournament, somebody mentioned this to me. We were sitting at the table that John Shively, was it you?
Yeah.
Well, it was you. And, and I said, oh my gosh, John Shively. I said, did you know that John Shively was indicted by a grand jury for contempt of the legislature when he was the chief of staff under the Sheffield administration? This is real life. And he was thoroughly disgraced and kicked out of the government. Okay? So we quickly got onto a computer, found the article from the Anchorage Daily News from 1998 or whatever, well, I can't remember exactly when it was, ran upstairs to the computer room with a thumb drive, printed out a bunch of copies of it, gave it to all of our teams, and the very next round, they went up against a team that's quoting John Shively and all this. And so our team said, gee, did you know that John Shively was disgraced and thrown out of the Sheffield administration and was indicted by a grand jury? And I was like, no. Well, that's the end of that case.
We won that debate.
Needless to say, we won that debate round.
And that's totally kosher. That's coaching. And debate coaches watch the opposition to see what their cases are, and they talk to their kids when they come out of debates, what were their points, and that's totally how it goes. It's this game, it's this evolving game.
I mean, these guys are, cool. They're between 14 and 18 years old. They don't know. I mean, well, he knows what happened in Turkey in 1918. Most people don't.
I don't know what Turkey is.
So they only have a limited amount of history that they can go on, and so yeah, we try. If you're listening to a DI and the person's making you cry, cry. If you're watching an HI and they're making you laugh, laugh. That's okay. You're allowed to be. They want to see that. They'll get halfway through their piece and go, man, I thought I was being really funny and I'm dying out here. I mean, that judge looks like they died yesterday. Right? That's not right. You're allowed to engage to that degree, but not in debate. In debate, nothing.
We've had some fun.
I've made people laugh in debate before. You're just listening and you are taking notes. You're just listening and taking notes. You do not tip your hand, because good debate teams, if they see you as a judge, they can tell which way you're leaning. And believe me, the good ones, they're looking at you. They'll start to move their case in that direction. And while it's totally legal for them to try to do that, you don't want to give them that opportunity. You want to just be totally stoic.
As close as you can be.
As close
I
as
mean,
you
someone
can.
really pulls a zinger, and there are zingers. I mean, this is what I love about debate is that it's improv. Those crossfires are total improv.
Sometimes they're really funny too.
And they can be very funny. And Brennan Whittemore, a couple of times, he's a kid on our debate team. He has just like dissected people with one line. He did one about George Bush. Somebody was going on about Yale education and blah blah blah, and Brennan's just listening, and he just says, well, George Bush went to Yale. It's just like, and in one line,
the response to the person who he said that to was like, George Bush went to Yale?
Right, exactly.
He sat down.
You know, sometimes someone will cite a piece of evidence. They'll say, well, 83% of the people in the world, blah, blah, blah. And you can ask, they can ask for each other's evidence, and they are supposed to supply that evidence. If I tell Tim that I've got such and such a statistic, and he says, well, I want to see that, I'm supposed to hand him a piece of paper that he and his partner can then look at while the
And
debate
then they
goes on.
can get
Don't
up and
stop the
say, but
debate.
wait a minute. You know,
That
read
survey
too
was
much.
done in 1924,
Right.
you know, and that doesn't matter anymore. And so you can, you know, really skilled debaters will pick apart the other person's evidence. Sometimes the evidence can be very weak, but they'll just like, oh, I've got evidence, you know. So it depends, you know. You're going to see a wide range. If you judge debate, you're going to see some people that you're going to go, oh my God, this is painful, because they're new, or they're not well coached or whatever, and sometimes it can be really hard to watch. You know, and then you're going to see some kids that you're just going to go, wow, that was impressive. You know, so there's a wide range, but you do not have to feel in any way intimidated by being a judge of debate, because they're just supposed to try to convince you that their points make sense.
You're Joe Public, and you're supposed
You are
to be.
John Q. Public. That's who you are supposed to be.
And this whole debate form evolved because of policy debate, which became this speed talking thing, which is utterly bizarre. If you see policies, like high-level policy debaters are speaking inhumanly fast, and they're being judged by former policy debaters who have spoken inhumanly fast and can listen inhumanly fast. This was all in reaction to that, because people just said debate is turning into a joke. And so Ted Turner threw a bunch of money. He was an ex-debater, and he saw this evolution toward this bizarre, fast-talking form of debate. So the whole idea was just to overwhelm your opposition with a number of points, so that they would, it's like both sides are juggling 9 points, and the guy that drops one of his 9 pins loses the debate. It's totally stupid. And so Ted Turner just said, let's have another kind. And the design was, this should be a debate that we can put on television, and the public could watch it and learn something from it, and not be